we're in a world today where AI can actually predict breast cancer.
In 10 years, has AI solved cancer?
It won't necessarily cure cancer, but do I think that we can predict?
In 5 years, are all the elderly going to be wearing robot legs?
I certainly hope so.
This to me is wild.
People are changing every day and they're moving around every day. And so we're pattern recognizing and we're sucking in data. AI is exponentially changing things, assuming two things, which is one, there's enough data to basically do the analytics on that's clean. And then two,
All right, today we've got Chia-Lin Simmons. She is the CEO of the publicly traded company LogicMark. Chia-Lin, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Mark. It's great to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. I want to start it off with asking you why you're the CEO of LogicMark, which I know kind of is not maybe the traditional question you're asked, but you've previously worked at Looky-Loo, Google, Hammond International, Samsung, Playphone, Time Warner, AOL, Audible. There's a few more. I even heard that you had an option to work at Disney. Why are you working at LogicMark? Why are you, and by the way, not just working there, but leadership positions at these companies? Why turn down those positions? Why work and drive LogicMark?
I did not seem like the logical person to be leading a company that's in a I fall and I can't get up space. Let's be honest, I spent most of my career in what I would call sort of cutting edge technology aspects. And so working at Harman, I was at a venture-backed company that was building connected cars. I was the person who launched mobile products at Audible at 2005 when only 35% of Americans had smartphones. And so that did not seem like a logical fit to basically take somebody with an interest in AI and sort of leading edge technology to basically put them in probably the most old school businesses, right? But I think what really drove me to this particular market and this particular company is that at the end of the day, we're really looking for transformation. All of us who are the 1 in 3 millennials and half of Gen Xers out there who are caretakers, sandwich generation caretakers of our elderly loved ones, was looking for transformation in this industry. And most of the companies in this space are, I would say, marketing companies. They buy technology from other people, but they don't innovate on that technology, which is why, in many ways, coming into this as a person who is very much interested, has a patent in like AI, going into this industry makes a lot more sense because we're really looking for transformation, all of us, not just the ones that, are being taken care of, but really the people who are the caretakers. And so of which I am one of those. For
the caretakers, meaning my mother, my father, getting older, I want to make sure that they're safe, they're comfortable, et cetera.
Absolutely. I think as a sandwich generation, we're sort of in that position where we use a lot of technology to manage everything. It doesn't seem like it's, a natural fit, but actually helped work on a connected car business, worked on IoT connected products when I was at Google. And so this idea of being sort of connected and actually getting more data and actually utilizing that data to help other people, it seems like a natural fit. Now, the question becomes like, is this industry ready for it? Probably not quite yet. We're at still, I think we're in an adoption phase, but it's needed. It's like the days, and not to age myself here, where we're really happy running around with our Razr phones, right? And we're like, oh my God, my Razr phone's so great. And then the iPhone came around and we're like, what? I remember having discussions with the BlackBerry people and they're like, I don't think we should work with Audible because, smartphones are going to be like productivity technology for the corporation and we don't really need multimedia smartphones. So we feel like LogicMark is poised to help look at this industry, transform how it looks like, bringing things like AI, ML into the industry so that we're not just really excellent reactive technology companies. And I think that's what we are. We need to be better utilizing AI to be better reactive technologies, get you help that you need. But really what we're excited about is predictive analytics, which is to say utilizing that data that we have working with you to basically help your caretakers prevent that first fall or that second fall, because it's fairly catastrophic typically from a fall where your health gets worse and worse. And for corporations like insurance companies, they should want us to be successful, right? Because ultimately at the end of the day, when you have a fall, your health outcome is typically worse and you spend more money to basically deal with the outcomes of those falls. And so we think that there's a win-win for everybody to basically prevent that fall. That basically happens to 1 in 4 person over 65. And that's a huge, huge amount of people.
Right. And I mean, if you can get the insurance companies on board, then you have your sales go through the roof. I want to talk about predictive AI because I think that's really interesting, Chia-Lin. But before we go to that, you also mentioned something that I think is important as well, which is the world ready for this? What is the adoption needs to happen? Because there, just over the past year, have been a lot of new wearable technologies that have come out and flopped because everyone says, what do I need a wearable for? I got my phone, because we really go everywhere with our phone. What is the change in wearables that needs to happen so that people adapt more wearables into their lifestyle?
Yeah, I always chuckle a little bit because, as a woman, I love my phone, and it's huge and it's great, but it's huge in my hands. And so that means that if you're clutching it and you're utilizing it, it's actually burdensome, it's heavy, it's all of those things. And so typically when you look at the aging population, or even for women, for personal safety for us, carrying something like this around is actually just not very practical. This is the reason why there's such a sense of like a desire for good wearables. And the question of adoption is always like, well, is that wearable? Does it make sense for your audience? So for us, for example, this is our newest product called FA Max. So it is a smartphone. It actually allows you to call your family members. We actually have a proprietary UX and ecosystem that we are happy to license to other people. But the reason why this phone is so small is because, typically speaking, like, you want to be able to sort of wear it around your neck, wear it around your body. Our product is actually not cell phone forward, it's actually medical alert forward. So it means that it has fall detection. So if you pass out and you can't push a button, you're going to get help. You want the capability to basically do geofencing for those with Alzheimer's care, right? But in order to do that, you actually have to have it persistent. And when it's this big, how many times have we heard the elderly parents actually, it's so big, I just left it on the table and I forgot about it. I'm 52. Sometimes I forget and leave my phone all over the house. And so, the way that you actually get to and lead to safety is actually having your items persistent. That said, my 16-year-old, I don't think I've ever seen her without her iPhone, like literally, like everywhere, right? And so if I'm looking at producing, a product like ours for, our, personal safety product called Aster, then we just need a Bluetooth, and this needs to be small and it needs to sit on a keychain. So when she's actually trying to fend off some kind of person, if she's running, then this is small enough because no one's going to unlock a phone for a personal safety, app and like get help. Like, you're going to just push the button. And our app doesn't require you to have it persistent and drain your battery. Like, you just need to have it on your phone. And we figured out a way to just have you push the button, and then it will get you 24/7 monitor service and 911 help immediately, and let your parents know where you are.
So that's interesting, because when you say, my grandma, she's 92, she doesn't really have her cell phone on her all the time, right? She grew up in a different age, different time. And the idea of, okay, well, now she's connected everywhere she goes makes sense. That seems like a natural place to have a wearable. Going to the teenager and again, a lot of people have kind of tried the wearables in the teenager demographic. I think, maybe sunglasses or Ray-Bans, what Meta is doing, that maybe can work out, although they need to figure out the batteries and stuff like that. But, so that actually makes sense. You're targeting a demographic that I think would adopt the wearable technology more quickly. You mentioned that it has predictive fall technology. How does that work? How does it know when it falls? I assume there's a little sensor in that. When it drops, it triggers. Can you talk to me a little bit about that tech?
Yeah, so in the 3.5 years I've been the pivot CEO of this company, we have been super busy. So we actually have a lot of patents. I think like in 3.5 years, we filed more than 25 patents. And so a lot of it around things like predictive technology and optimizing algorithms. And so today, a lot of these things have just one sensor-based algorithm. So that's running on accelerometer. So it's basically running on speed. So if you're falling really quickly, like pitching forward, so it's actually looking for that speed and stop. Right. So rapid speed stop. And that's basically how they predict the user to optimize the algorithm for that. Now, I'm a data geek. So, data on one sensor is actually not very good. Like, really what you want is, like, I always call it like minimum 3 sets of data for triangulation of reassurance, right? So accelerometer, gyroscope, we actually have altimeter sort of patents, so that you're getting basically as much data as you can on not just sort of like, is this a slump of a fall? Is it a fast pitch fall? Is the sensor I put on my window, for example, that could be connected to devices, is it vibrating harder or less hard? Because it gives you a sense of impact and then the severity of a fall. And in the case of the Freedom Alert Max, we actually have video validation. And so that means that if the instance was triggered that looks like a fall, the caretaker could actually have the opportunity to use a video capability to look at the front and the back camera to see whether or not, in fact, this is prone or what the visual looks like. Then we use that third piece of data and utilize the visuals to determine whether or not, we're seeing things prone or not. And then that adds to basically the validation piece. And so to us, one of the reasons why people don't want to wear these devices is because they often have very horrible sort of fault detection algorithms. And so basically, if you sit down too quickly as an elderly person, then it triggers and then it screams out. In the case of my mother-in-law, at a ramen restaurant in Oakland, Mrs. Becker, are you okay? Everything stops, right? And everybody turns and looks at her. And she's this lovely, woman who was like a 40-year tenure art teacher, beautiful outfit with this ginormous, remote control looking thing hanging around her neck, completely screws her outfit. Right. And it's screaming out and she's super embarrassed. And I'm thinking, and this is before I even took on this job, I'm thinking somebody needs to do a little better with this. And I'm a geek. So I've done all the research with my husband on the best services and products and it was the best that we can do. Right. And I filed it in the back of my mind, somebody needs to do something about this, and then moved on and worked on my AI company. Right. So, but then when the opportunity came around for this, I thought, well, maybe that somebody needs to be me. And these devices need to be a lot cuter so people are willing to wear it. It needs to be compact enough. Ironically, that's not too small because, the elderly focus groups tell us too small is no good, but too big is not good either. Right. So you actually have to look for a form factor that's actually a really good fit with your audience. And sometimes that just right Goldilocks experience needs to sort of arrive. And the iWatch is very difficult for that, right? It's meant for somebody who's a 16-year-old like my daughter and, an active runner like my husband, right? But is it a good fit for an elderly, patient? I'm not entirely sure that's actually the case. So
maybe the problem I have with the watches is you always have to charge them. It's just like another thing to charge. And I just never wear my smartwatch because I just forget to charge it. Quite frankly, it's kind of annoying. So, and you mentioned that you put sensors on the windows too, and it can detect the vibrations of a fall. Did I hear you?
That is a very strong interest. We're doing a lot of R&D work on a number of sort of multi-sensor experiences in a home because, we of course, we all want our family members to wear things on their body and ensure that they're safe. But there are just times when you're not going to be able to do that because you're in a shower. And while I love this device, I mean, it's splash proof, but it's really not completely safe in the water. And so there are places where you're just going to not have that protection, whereas 50% of people who, use these devices, they fall in a shower, right? And so how do we look for ways to basically optimize their ability to basically age at home? And according to surveys, people over 50, 90% of them want to age at home. And so, and that's, so looking for ways to do that so that the sensor vibrations could help you, the sound of crashing can help you, right? We're doing so much active work and we have so much patents around sort of things like this because, again, we want to be really good at reactive technology, but also that data can actually help us with the predictive technology, knowing that what looks like a fall incidence at 10 o'clock Tuesday is you in a yoga studio. And then the first time we don't know and we're like, hey, are you okay, Mrs. Becker? And you're like, yeah, discreetly, we ask, and then they're like, we're fine. I'm fine. And we're like, oh, yoga studio, 10 o'clock Tuesday. And this happens again next Tuesday. I'm like, you're just asking, you're doing yoga. So we're learning to personalize against, your needs. And so that not every time that you come, at 10 o'clock, on Tuesdays that we're bothering you saying hey, are you okay? And it's I've already told you 6 times, I'm just doing yoga, man. Right. So we should get better so that we can actually look for the pattern differentials and the differentiations and activities and all of those things to say, you were a 10,000 step yoga doing 65-year-old, and in the past 3 weeks you went from 10,000 steps yoga every Tuesday to no yoga and 5,000 steps. And when we see patterns like this for a woman who is 52, when we look at that digital twin against other digital twin cohorts within an ecosystem, what does that look like? Oh, in that cohort that is multi-months ahead, when they see this pattern, 3 months later, 46% had a fall. 6 months later, 60% had a fall. And so knowing that data, we're not necessarily saying you're going to fall. We're saying that this is the pattern that we're, identifying against a cohort as well. So take that data and go to your doctor and say, like, why are we seeing a difference in pattern, right? And a lot of these things actually help. There's things that we can basically analyze and help with predicting a potential. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You kind of like forwarded into the second question I had there. And the other thing that, and you may not get this question a lot, but one of the things I think is maybe underestimated in the world right now is the importance of the data that you get from users, right? Heck, Meta's built a multi-billion-dollar business off the back of data. And I think that's essentially one of the big values to companies with wearables as well. You're getting data, you're able to be more predictive of health outcomes in this case. But I'm wondering, outside of just saying, hey, Mrs. Smith, we've noticed some trends that could be, you might want to get looked at, this could lead to a fall. We've seen this, your fall risk has increased 75% based on our data. What are some other applications that we could use that data with, right? If we get that data, what are some other applications that might be used? Because once you have information and data on a particular demographic, I mean, it seems like the possibilities are limitless. What would be the next level?
Yeah. So, sometimes people ask us about our patent portfolio and, they ask me things like, well, what are the other ways to look at it? Like one of the areas that we actually have a patent on and people are just like, what the hell is game theory? Like, what is this thing about game theory patents? I'm just like, well, other than the fact that I'm a strategy geek, well, okay, there's more to that. And it has to do with the fact that in order for basically anybody to age happily and successfully, you're really looking at three vectors. You're looking at basically personal physical health, you're looking at mental health, and you're looking at financial health. And so all of those things are premised upon people basically doing things like, operating with each other, right? And so, for example, physical health, can we use this data to say, you're being taken care of by your family members and that person never shows up to take care of you? The device, the app service that comes with our product, can tell whether or not you're going to be able to sort of be there and you're there from a sort of Bluetooth perspective, right? So that's really helpful enough for not just the professional caretaker, for example, and helping their company say this nurse number one was supposed to come up for Mrs. Becker for 30 minutes and didn't show up in time and also didn't stay for 30 minutes. And so they're looking for fraud and they're game theoried out as to whether or not there's higher probability across the board that there's a fraud event, right, for taking care of people physical health wise, but even potentially for, I counted my grandson Bobby to come over. He never goes. And now everybody in the family knows that Bobby can't be relied upon. So we got to send somebody else, right? So from a physical health perspective, some of this data is actually helpful with applications on even things like financial health. We're a platform. I'm a Zoogler, and so I always think about things in a sort of framework. And so we're not like an iWatch and iOS experience. We're much more of an Android experience. And so our services could be applied to other products and our services could be on top of other products. And so if you think about it this way, one of the things I care about is I'm never going to make a blood pressure monitor product. I'm never going to basically do blood glucose monitoring. But what I am interested in is how these things sort of pull together to basically make a determination of your overall health, not just falls, because they're super helpful for falls, right? High blood pressure, low blood pressure. We're putting out a service called, Med Alert because med adherence has a lot of impact on falls. But all of those things are prefaced on, you being healthy from a physical health perspective. And so having a platform allows us to do that. Even having a platform giving you the opportunity as a caretaker, say grandma, I'm thinking of you, push a button, sends a heart, her device shows a heart, mental health,
Sure.
right? So we're thinking a lot of ways about how data aggregation and not just our isolated pod of data that we're collecting, but the partnership with other people's devices in terms of a platform and a HIPAA compliant platform experience can actually give broader perspective to everybody involved, right? Maybe the people who have the blood pressure monitor device is wanting to know that the 10,000 steps went down to 5,000, and that actually helps them think about predicting, blood pressure health. and whether or
Yeah.
not.
Well, and I think one of the unique, I mean, the HIPAA compliance is big in the AI world. Everyone's concerned about privacy. That's very important. But having the movement data to me is really interesting. And I want to share something that is somewhat associated with what you do. And I just found out about this the other day, and I want to share it with people because it's amazing. It's this company Suit X. Have you heard of this before, Shai?
Is that the one where they will sort of do something and it falls?
Well, not exactly. So Suit X is more optimized for humans that are going to be working in warehouses, right? And so you can see it gives extra back support, extra leg support. In this case, it's giving shoulder support. So it's not, the ability to lift is not just limited to your muscles. It's limited. It's further limited by this like mech suit.
Yeah.
This to me is wild, because one of the biggest challenges that a warehouse worker would have now is their body breaks down over time. Okay. But if I'm wearing what is equivalent to like a robotic suit, I can carry my wisdom into that warehouse for decades past what my body would be capable of. And I guess my question to you, Chia-Lin, is in 5 years, are all the elderly going to be wearing robot legs?
You know, we work with the Veterans Administration. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, will every senior wear robot legs? Will, veterans who are, not, don't have the use of certain sort of, muscles, and so forth, capable of now doing that? I certainly hope so. I was one of the early lovers of a Dean Kamen product that was, I believe it was a wheelchair that actually can stand up on the two wheels. It was being run by Johnson & Johnson's Independence Technology. So as a business school student, I actually had an offer to go and intern there. I had never been more enamored, because I'm a geek. And so the idea of actually being able to work on a health product that allows and gives people the capability to like look at somebody in the eye when you're, don't have use of your legs. But something like this that you're sharing, like giving people maybe the opportunity to walk in the future with support. And at least because the reason why I asked about sort of the fall was because I saw a technology that was a sort of suit-like product like that, but it would actually kind of like, those, when you go into a car crash, like basically the suit would inflate and if you were falling as a senior, which, again, because falls are so important to people, like they're just like, and then you would wear this thing and it would inflate just like a crash inflection. I'm like, like that seems really interesting to me, right? So things like this where it's an augmented experience for the future where the technology enables you to, live better and happier lives when your body isn't quite as able as your mind.
Right.
Even in a sense that may augment and help your mind, optimize a little bit more as well as you're aging. Those are exciting opportunities. And for me, when I see sort of AI and where technology is leading for healthcare, that's an area that really excites me. And that's also why I'm at the business I'm at today, right? We're in a world today where AI can actually predict breast cancer, 5 years before you see the first and see and feel the first nodule. It's exciting times to be here, right? To basically see the applied AI into the world that we live in that can actually really help people live longer, better lives. So.
Right. And I've been hearing talks that AI is going to be able to solve some of the most complicated health issues in the world. How soon in prediction? Give me the over and under on this, Chia-Lin. In 10 years, has AI solved cancer? Has cancer been solved in 10 years, over under?
Let me caveat it by this way because I'm kind of anal about this kind of thing. So I would say over in a sense that, it won't necessarily cure cancer, but do I think that we can predict the potential sort of emergence of that cancer and try to excise those like particular cancers ahead of time or deal with them proactively ahead of time before we see the first instances versus the metastasizes in a way that it's beyond our capabilities, like for example, ovarian cancer, right? You don't, oftentimes by the time you feel and see any symptoms, you're pretty much stage 4, right? Like those things, I think completely like over. Right? Like I think that AI can do that in a heartbeat. Do I think that AI has the capability from a research and analytics perspective? Slightly under. I think it's very difficult to look at multi-sensing environments and cure, right? I think it's a very different thing to see a potential and excise it first versus completely eradicating it. So, but I am hopeful, and I will say that 10-year mark, feels very comfortable to me. And I hardly ever say that. Now, famously, we're going to come back to this maybe 10 years from now and be like, you were so wrong. And it was 3 years, right? But, I don't want to be McKinsey, right? I remember the first reports of McKinsey came out about e-commerce and they're like, by 2000, everything will be e-commerce. So it took a little longer, right? Always takes a little longer. But with this particular instance, I think AI is exponentially changing things, assuming two things, which is one, there's enough data to basically do the analytics on that's clean. And then two, assuming that we've conquered some of the issues related to hallucinations by AI, right? So.
Yeah, the hallucinations are definitely a problem because I get some really wonky results. And I think part of the issue, at least for the next generation that's growing up, is if you become too reliant and you stop thinking critically about the answers that you could get roped into some wonky things. I mean, there's AI that's recommending putting glue on pizza to make the cheese stick. Recommending, if you feel like you need to gain weight, it recommends eating rocks. Like there's some like really crazy stuff that you can get from AI. So
yeah,
don't stop thinking critically. I actually have one more quick question for you, Shai, if I may. You're heavy into tech investing. You're an active angel investor. I think if I read correctly, you've got millions in startup investing now. How many AI tech companies are going to zero? What percentage of AI tech companies are going to zero? Because it's every company now is quote unquote an AI company. How many of these AI tech companies are going to zero?
So I want to make sure I caveat this. I actually am an LP investor on behalf of a corporation, a $4.8 billion company, and I do their LP investments for them into venture capital funds who do that AI investing. They do some sort of direct. I do some angel. I'm not investing millions as an angel investor. I wish I was. That's really hard to say. I mean, look, I tend to be probably one of the more critical direct investors out there as an angel investor, and mainly because I think that typically when you have a lot of angel investors or even folks who are on the VC side, they are financial people, and so they maybe don't understand the execution of the technology or have delved deep enough, have patents, like have operating experiences to say call bullshit on things, right? And so, when it's fashionable, everybody's an AI company. When it was fashionable, everybody's an IoT company, right? But critically, they're not any of those things. So hard to say. I always hedge my bets here because it's very hard to say. I've seen some really interesting things out there. My question always goes back to computing power. Like, again, hallucinations and a capability to absorb data. Like, exactly, are you an AI company that actually has access to fresh new data all the time? Like, we're excited about what we do because people are changing every day and they're moving around every day. And so we're pattern recognizing and we're sucking in data and looking for pattern and then dumping out. So privacy is important, tokenization of data is important, but as an individual, you're constantly in movement, you're constantly moving around. So our data is constantly fresh and we're processing fresh data from a lot of people. That makes the data valuable and it makes the data important. When you're basically deep AI and you're regurgitating other people's data, and you're doing that because there's only a finite amount of data that's out there that you can absorb, then what next, right? So the hallucination is not maybe as critical when it comes to things like, did I get the right quote? And like, did I get AI to paint me a picture? And like, there's 6 fingers instead of 5. That seems less consequential. But when you start talking about things like, did grandma have a fall or not? And then my AI is predicting that probably is a fall because there was this sort of weird trajectory. And I'm like, grandma's not like hidden dragons, what is it, Crouching Tiger's Hidden Dragons. Like, she's not kung fuing that way at 65. So like, I've got to ground that technology from hallucinating with things like in our patent, like things like we have a personal physics engine. Right? We're looking at the environment, we're looking at grandma's overall health, and we're grounding in real physics and saying like, that's not a probability for the AI, because the AI is always coming up with tons and tons of things because they're somewhat limited by the data. So when I look at investing in companies, I ask those questions to basically say, what's the probability of access to data and fresh data consistently? And I look at things like, how do they deal with things like hallucination, right?
Fantastic.
Oftentimes they don't have the right answer.
Right. So it sounds like what's the capability of getting the first party data? How much first party data are you bringing in? Is it key?
First party data is
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, and good and fresh data, given the AI world, is critical.
Fantastic. Well, Chia-Lin, thanks for joining the show and spreading your wisdom today. Very much appreciate it. Y'all, you can definitely want to connect with Chia-Lin here on LinkedIn under C Simmons, at C Simmons. I'll put some links below, and give your grandparents, your parents the best quality of life. Link below to get started. Thanks, Chia-Lin.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here with you.